2:17 in the morning. The room is silent. Your phone is face down on the nightstand. The lights have been off for almost an hour. You're exhausted. Your body wants to sleep. But your mind has other plans. Without warning, it pulls you back into a conversation that happened 3 years ago. You hear every word. You remember the awkward pause, the expression on their face, the sentence you wish you had never said, and then it begins. I should have answered differently. Why did I say that? They probably thought I was an idiot. One thought becomes two, two become 10. Within minutes, you're no longer remembering the conversation. You're rewriting it, creating better responses, imagining different outcomes, running the same mental movie over and over, again, as if somewhere inside your head, there's a director refusing to yell, "Cut." Eventually, you get frustrated. Why can't I just let this go? Why won't my brain shut up? If you've ever asked yourself those questions, you're far from alone. Millions of people describe the same experience, not just at night. During meetings, while driving, in the shower, halfway through a movie, their mind suddenly leaves the present and disappears into an endless loop of what if only, and maybe next. Time. Most people call this overthinking, and almost everyone assumes the same thing. I think too much. Because something is wrong with me, it feels like a reasonable explanation. After all, if overthinking makes us anxious, if it steals our sleep, if it leaves us mentally exhausted, why else would it happen? But what if we've misunderstood the problem completely? What if overthinking isn't a malfunction, but one of the most sophisticated survival systems your brain has ever developed? That sounds impossible. Why would evolution create something that makes us miserable? The answer begins with a simple fact about your brain that most people never learn. Your brain was never designed to understand the world. It was designed to predict it. Right now, before your eyes finish reading this sentence, your brain is already guessing what word comes next. When someone throws you a ball, your brain predicts where it will land before your hands even move. When you hear footsteps behind you, your brain starts building possible explanations before you turn. Around prediction is happening every second of every day, because prediction is faster than reaction. And for most of human history, being fast meant staying alive. Imagine one of your ancestors walking through a forest. A branch suddenly moves. There are two possibilities. Maybe it's just the wind. Maybe it's a predator. Waiting for certainty could be fatal. So the brain evolved to make educated guesses long before it had complete information. Sometimes those guesses were wrong, but being wrong occasionally was far less costly than reacting too slowly. Over thousands of generations, this prediction system became astonishingly powerful. It learned to anticipate danger before danger arrived. At least physical danger. The modern world introduced a problem evolution never had time to prepare for. Most of the threats we face today don't have teeth. They're made of uncertainty, a difficult conversation, an unanswered message, a job interview, a first date, an important presentation. You can't fight uncertainty. You can't run away from it. So your brain does the only thing it knows how to do. It starts predicting. What if they reject me? What if I fail? What if I made the wrong decision? Notice something interesting. None of those questions are about the present. They're all about futures that haven't happened. And that's the first plot twist. You think overthinking is about the past. It isn't even. When you're replaying an old memory, your brain isn't obsessed with yesterday. It's using yesterday to simulate tomorrow. That embarrassing conversation from 3 years ago, your brain isn't replaying it because it enjoys making you cringe. It's asking, if we're ever in a situation like this again, how do we avoid making the same mistake? The argument you keep revisiting, the opportunity you missed, the decision you regret, they're all raw material for prediction. Your brain believes it's solving a future problem, and that's why overthinking can feel strangely productive, even when it leaves you completely drained. Because deep inside, your brain isn't trying to torture you. It believes it's protecting you. But that raises an even bigger mystery. If your brain is trying to protect you, why do the thoughts keep repeating? Surely, after thinking about the same problem 100 times, it should have found the answer. So why does it keep starting over? The answer has almost nothing to do with intelligence, and everything to do with one emotion your brain struggles to tolerate more than almost anything else. Uncertainty. Uncertainty. At first, that doesn't sound like a serious problem. Most people would probably say they're afraid of failure, or rejection, or making the wrong decision. But if you look closely, all of those fears have something in common. They're rooted in not knowing whether the interview will go well, not knowing if they liked your message, not knowing if choosing one path means losing a better one. Your brain has a surprisingly difficult relationship with unanswered questions, because for millions of years, uncertainty often meant danger. Imagine hearing footsteps outside your shelter in the middle of the night. If you knew it was a friend, you could relax. If you knew it was a predator, you could prepare. But if you didn't know, your brain couldn't simply ignore it. It had to keep thinking, keep predicting, keep searching for clues until the uncertainty disappeared. That ancient system still lives inside you. Only today, instead of wondering whether something outside the cave wants to eat you, it wonders why someone hasn't replied to your text, whether your boss sounded disappointed, whether your partner's "I'm fine" actually means they're upset. The danger changed, the prediction system didn't, and that's why your brain often mistakes uncertainty for a problem that must be solved immediately. Here's something fascinating. Have you ever noticed that some of your biggest worries completely disappear the moment you finally know the answer? Waiting for exam results can feel unbearable. The moment you receive them, even if they aren't perfect, the anxiety often drops, waiting to hear back. After a job interview can consume your thoughts for days, but once the phone rings, your mind suddenly becomes quieter. What changed? Not necessarily the outcome, the uncertainty. Your brain can handle bad news far better than endless unknowns, because once reality arrives, prediction is no longer necessary, but overthinking creates a trap. When the future is impossible to know, your brain starts generating simulations instead. Maybe this will happen. But what if it's actually this? Wait, every possibility feels like progress. Every new scenario feels like you're getting closer to certainty. Except you're not. You're just creating more possibilities to evaluate. It's like trying to escape a maze by building new hallways. The harder you think, the larger the maze becomes, and then something even stranger happens. Your brain begins confusing thinking with solving. We've all experienced it. You're lying awake replaying the same problem. It feels productive, it feels responsible, almost as if stopping would be careless. After all, if the answer is important, shouldn't you keep thinking until you find it? Except hours pass. Nothing changes. The problem is still there. Only now you're exhausted. Why? Because your brain quietly crossed a line. It stopped searching for information and started searching for certainty. Those aren't the same thing. Information has limits. Certainty often doesn't. There comes a point where you've gathered everything you reasonably can. Beyond that point, every extra thought simply rearranges the same pieces into slightly different patterns. The puzzle never changes, only the order does. This is why overthinking feels impossible to stop. Not because you're discovering something new, but because your brain hasn't received the signal that the search is over. And here's where many people accidentally make things worse. They tell themselves, "Stop thinking." It sounds logical, but psychology has revealed something deeply counterintuitive. The harder you try not to think about something, the more attention your brain gives. Imagine I give you one simple instruction. For the next 10 seconds, don't think about a white bear, not even once. What happened? Almost immediately, the image appeared. Not because you failed, because your brain had to keep checking whether you were thinking about the bear. Ironically, that constant checking kept bringing the thought back. The same mechanism often appears in overthinking. You tell yourself, "Don't worry, don't think about it, move on." But your brain keeps asking, "Am I still thinking about it?" And every time it checks, it reloads the very thought you're trying to escape. The loop tightens, the frustration grows, until eventually you start believing the thoughts are controlling you. But here's the second plot twist. Your thoughts aren't trapping you. Your brain is trapped in a search it doesn't know how to finish. And once you understand what finally convinces the brain that the search is complete, everything about overthinking begins to change. Everything changes when you realize something almost nobody is taught. Your brain doesn't need every problem to have a perfect answer. It needs to believe the search is no longer worth the energy. That may sound like the same thing. It isn't. Think about watching a detective movie. For the first hour, every clue matters. Every conversation feels important. Every detail could be the missing piece. But once the mystery is solved, something interesting happens. Your brain stops searching. You don't spend the next 3 weeks wondering who the killer was. The investigation is over. The file is closed. Overthinking is what happens when your brain believes the case is still open. Every unanswered text, every difficult decision, every embarrassing memory, every uncertain future. Your brain labels them as unfinished, and unfinished things have a strange effect on the human mind. Psychologists have observed this for decades. People naturally remember unfinished tasks better than completed ones, a phenomenon often referred to as the Zeigarnik effect. Not because unfinished tasks are more important, but because your brain keeps them active, just in case they still require attention. Thousands of years ago, that was incredibly useful. If you forgot an unfinished shelter before a storm, or abandoned a hunt halfway through, the consequences could be serious. Today, however, the same system can become confused. It can't always tell the difference between a problem that can be solved and a problem that can only be lived through. That's why some questions never seem to leave your mind. Did I make the right choice? What if I regret this? What if they secretly dislike me? The tragedy is that these questions often have no immediate answer, not because you're missing information, because the future hasn't happened yet, and yet your brain keeps searching as though one more hour of thinking will somehow reveal tomorrow. But tomorrow doesn't exist yet. So the search never ends. Here's the final plot twist. Overthinking isn't the search for answers, it's the search for certainty, and certainty is something life almost never offers. The people who appear calm aren't people who solved every uncertainty. They're people whose brains gradually learned something different. That uncertainty is not the same as danger. This doesn't happen overnight. Your brain learned the opposite lesson over many years. Every time uncertainty appeared, it responded by thinking harder. Every time anxiety showed up, it interpreted more thinking as protection. The habit became automatic. But habits can be updated, not by forcing yourself to stop thinking, not by repeating positive affirmations, and not by waiting until you feel fearless. They change when your brain experiences evidence that contradicts its old prediction. Imagine standing at the edge of a cold swimming pool. Your brain predicts the water will be unbearable. It keeps you hesitating, calculating, imagining. But the moment you finally step in, reality replaces prediction. Sometimes the water is exactly as cold as expected. Sometimes it's not. Either way, your brain no longer has to imagine. It now has evidence. The same principle quietly applies to overthinking. The conversation you're avoiding, the decision you've postponed, the project you've planned for months, the apology you've rewritten 100 different ways. As long as they exist only in your imagination, your brain has nothing but predictions to work with. Predictions multiply. Possibilities multiply. Thoughts multiply. Action changes the equation. Not because action guarantees success, because action gives your brain real information. Real information is always more valuable than endless speculation. That's why people often say, "It wasn't nearly as bad as I imagined." The situation didn't magically improve. The prediction finally collided with reality. And reality, even when imperfect, is usually less frightening than infinite uncertainty. Now think back to the beginning of this video. It's still 2:17 in the morning. You're still lying in bed. The room hasn't changed. The silence hasn't changed. But something else has. You no longer believe your mind is broken. You no longer see yourself as someone who simply thinks too much. Instead, you see what has been happening all along. A brain that evolved to protect you. Using an ancient prediction system in a modern world filled with uncertainties it was never designed to handle. Your thoughts were never the enemy. They're signals. They're predictions. They're unfinished simulations searching for an ending. The mistake isn't that your brain creates them. The mistake is believing every prediction deserves another hour of your attention. Because not every question can be answered today. Not every possibility needs to be explored. And not every thought deserves to become a conversation. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is allow a question to remain unanswered, to let uncertainty exist without treating it as an emergency. Because the moment your brain learns that uncertainty doesn't always mean danger, it slowly stops sounding the alarm, and when the alarm finally grows quiet, you don't become someone who never thinks. You become someone who no longer mistakes every thought for the truth. Maybe that's what peace of mind really is. Not the absence of thoughts, but the freedom to let them come, without feeling the need to follow every single one.